So, hello and welcome to what I'm sure will be one of the first of many interviews here at Fanclusive, where there's no gates, just fans. I'm one of your co hosts, Kay. I'm an avid gamer, comic lover, TTRPG enthusiast, sci fi fantasy nerd junkie, and just about anything I can get my hands on. And with me, we have our lovely co host, Missy. Missy, go ahead and say hello.
Hello, I'm Dr. Missy Merchant, subpar to K, but I am also nerd at heart. I am all languages, psychobabble, D&D, Magic the Gathering, a horror hound, so you name it, I'm there.
Before we begin, I just want to give a huge shout out to Cool Waters Production for making this entire thing possible. We're very, very excited to get this chance to talk to the amazingly talented Dave Barclay about not only his work, but his also upcoming autobiography, which is titled My Life with Animatronics, Movies, Puppets, and Beyond. So, Dave, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me along. It's brilliant.
Always a pleasure to have you. I have you back, especially with Kay and I. But to start off, for any of our viewers who aren't familiar with you or your body of work, they've obviously been under rocks for 4 decades at this point. But how about telling us a little bit about yourself?
Right. Well, I'm a second generation puppeteer. My mum and dad were puppeteers when I grew up from being a very small child. And so puppetry was around me in everything that I did as a kid. So I was a puppeteer myself and I made puppets. And I traveled with my parents doing shows around London and England. And really wanted to be a puppeteer when I grew up. But as I became more of a teenager, I was more interested in more like the special effects makeup sort of thing. There wasn't really, my book's called Animatronics, it really wasn't available as a job at that time. But that's the job that I wanted that actually hadn't really existed yet. So my first opportunity was to work on a sequel. It's called Empire Strikes Back. And I got to be part of the build crew for Yoda. Then I transitioned to be a puppeteer doing Yoda's eyes, and then eventually I ended up taking over from Frank Oz as chief puppeteer, and I was 19 years old. So that really launched my movie career from the transition from doing the live action theatrical work that I did with my parents and had done since from the age of about 5 or 6 into the recorded world of film and television. Some 45 years later, I thought, well, I'll write about this a little bit and explain a little bit of my journey.
That's fantastic. I've heard people talk about, when you go into your career, you kind of dabble or like, tip your toe in the water. You basically just strapped yourself to a rocket and went right to the big show.
Well, I was really, really lucky. I mean, I remember I was, what, 17, 18, something like that, 17. And the original Star Wars A New Hope screened in London. My friend's father got us opening weekend tickets, which was a miracle. I don't know how he got that, but we saw that. And my friend and I sat and looked at each other and said, we have to work in the film industry. Oh, I'd love to work on something like that. And by pure chance, 2 years later, I was on as part of the crew and the cast of Empire Strikes Back. So it's like you say, careful what you wish for, but I really did wish for it, and it really did come true for me. I was just so lucky.
Now, if you will be so kind, Dave, I believe that there's a very interesting story how you ended up on The Empire Strikes Back that possibly involves Mark Hamill. So, do you want to go ahead and
Yeah,
regale our listeners as to how that came to be?
absolutely. Yes. Well, I was deciding what to do with my education. I wanted to get into the film industry, and I thought probably the best way would be go to university, study sculpture, because that's the way I thought I'd get into the makeup effects field, and then get into the movies. But typically at that time, people were taking a gap year, a year off before going to university. So I decided to do that, and I took a summer job in London's biggest toy store, famous toy store called Hamleys. I was demonstrating string puppets and the same string puppets that I'd had when I was a boy. One day when I was out at lunch, Mark Hamill came into the store. He bought a whole load of Pelham puppets, which were the puppets I was selling, and he said that he was interested in finding someone to make a Darth Vader string puppet for his personal collection. something like 18 inches tall, carved out of wood. So, and he told the person who was covering for me, and she said, "Well, the guy that's normally here, Dave, he would be perfect for that."
The one day you're not
The
there.
one time.
Yeah, and it was like an unusually early lunch I had to take because of the cover. Anyway, so I get back in and I'm freaked out because I was a huge Star Wars fan and I would have loved to have met Mark. I thought, oh no, I didn't get to meet Mark and I didn't get the commission for the puppet sales. So it was like everything was miserable. But my friend in the mail order department, Pat Anderson, she would often come down almost every other day from the like third or fourth floor and pick up various different Pelham puppets to be shipped around the world. So she was in the mail order department, and it was her job to send all the puppets back to Mark Hamill in California. So I asked her, is it possible to have Mark's address to write to him? She said, absolutely not. No, it's not company policy. And she handed me a little slip of paper, and so a letter was sent, but I never heard anything. And I thought, oh well. So my job at Hamleys came to an end, and I was off doing other things. I started doing some commercials, and there wasn't a lot of work around. And I was thinking, well, I'll probably have to think about sort of getting into university. And then a friend of mine at Hamleys called me and said, Mark Hamill's just come in looking for you. He would like you to build the marionette. So I got to meet Mark and his wife. They commissioned me to build the Darth Vader marionette, which I did, which took me about 6, 7 weeks to build. So when it was ready, I was invited along to Elstree Studios, which is where the Star Wars films, all the studio work was done, and saw Mark film one shot that he was doing on against blue screen. And when he was finished, he introduced me to the makeup supervisor, Stuart Freeborn.
Mhm.
And Stuart was a huge fan of mine because I was very into the special effects makeup, and he was England's finest makeup supervisor. And he'd done some amazing work on the original 2001, the Kubrick film. He built all the
Mhm.
apes that a lot of people thought were real apes, but he built those apes and developed all the mechanisms in the faces to bring them to life. So
Wow.
he was amazing, and I just loved meeting him. And he was very, very busy. And he said, "Oh well, yes, well, I might be in touch in a little while, perhaps see if you're available for some work." And I just took it as it was a very nice way of getting me out of his workshop because he was very
Right.
busy. A week later, I got a call, and he offered me work as a trainee on Empire Strikes Back, working with the new puppet Yoda.
Oh, wow.
So from working in the toy store, it transitioned to me getting my dream come true by working on Star Wars and also working on animatronic puppets. And Yoda really was the very first animatronic puppet in movies. And so my wish to work in that field came true as a puppeteer who wanted to develop this new technique of mechanical and servo driven motorized puppets. So it was totally the complete dream come true for me.
I would say it's kind of the opposite of careful what you wish for and never meet your heroes because both of those turned out very, very well for you when usually those are warnings.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Stuart Freeman was amazing. He was such a great teacher, and we would often sit there and just sort of troubleshoot and just try and come up with different ideas. And he was great because I would come up with sometimes complete load of rubbish. And he said, "No, don't worry, don't edit yourself. I just let's just get these ideas out." He said, "Because every once in a while it will spark him off on a particular rabbit hole, and we'd spend hours chatting and trying to find different ways of improving techniques." And it was an amazing learning curve. And as I say, I was 19 years old.
Oh, that's amazing. So I imagine that you got very close with the other, puppeteers and the special effects artists. And I know that that can happen really well with kind of more of the traditional cast. I was wondering
Yes.
how that relationship can kind of translate in terms of building relationships with the traditional actors, because you are an actor in a sense when you're working that puppetry. So I was wondering, have you ever found it difficult to kind of get out from behind the curtain, so to speak, to build those relationships?
Usually, what happens is the puppet or the character that you're performing, or the team of you are performing, that personality that is that character, like Yoda or Jabba the Hutt or Sprocket the dog or whoever that you're performing, that character is what connects to the actors. And if they really enjoy that character, then they enjoy working with you, because obviously you're one of the key um, people bringing that character to life. So for me, it's really, if we do our job properly as puppeteers, then we can pretty much stand as actors. And in fact, on Return of the Jedi, the director Richard Marquand got to a point where he wasn't talking to myself or Toby Philpott or John or Bob working on the parts. He talked to Jabba, and at one point he said, "Jabba, look over there," and he was directing Jabba. And of course, Jabba's looking at him, but he's a puppet. He's got no eyes. We couldn't see Richard where he was
Right.
pointing, so I had to say in Jabba's voice, I don't know where there is, sir. So and it was great. He had got so used to just speaking to Jabba and Jabba living in the moment that he just automatically thought we could tell what he wanted. So it was lovely.
That's got to feel like kind of one of the highest compliments you can get as a puppeteer, though.
I've been very lucky on all the different projects that I've worked on. I've always been very passionate about my love for puppetry and animatronic performances, and building all the different teams, both from the construction side, the animatronic builders, the engineers, the sculptors, because I do all of that. I love doing all of that. I grew up with my parents doing all the jobs for their traveling puppet theatre, so I grew up doing the same thing. I did all the sculpting, the molding, doing all the foam latex, all the fiberglass, and making the eyes and the mechanisms and the electronics, and on and on and on. So I love all of that. And for me, it's approaching those skills as puppet builders and engineers to improve the puppet, to improve the performance. And then you, as a performer, you get on there. Oh, this is great, and now we can improve the performance, and then we can make another leap the next time we build another puppet. So for me, it was just an ongoing series of experiments and trying to improve the sort of level of performance that we could bring out of a puppet.
Yeah, and as far as like having your hands on all aspects of like creation, bringing things to life, what were some of like the differences between being part of Jabba and being part of Yoda? Because they're, other than being puppets, they're essentially vastly different characters you had to bring to life.
Yes, indeed. I mean, and Yoda was the typical, basically hand puppet Muppet with your arm in the air, with a puppet on the end of your hands, and your mouth. The thumb is the mouth, and I think the second and third fingers were the upper lip, and the middle finger went into the eyebrows to make his eyebrows move. So Yoda was very much the hand puppet. It was the skill of Frank Oz to really control every digit of his hand in that face, along with now mechanical eyes, which made a huge difference to the level of animatronic puppets that had never really existed before. When we started with Yoda, no one really, there was no like how-to book for it. You couldn't go online and see what was going on. So it was, yeah, Frank was inventing it, and we were a bit part of that as we were going along, working out how to bring this character to life that would look realistic for the audience of the day. We took the same approach with Jabba, but he was not a typical glove puppet, of course. He was what I would call a body puppet. So Toby and I were inside. My right arm was Jabba's right arm, and Toby's left arm was Jabba's left arm, and we were shoulder to shoulder inside Jabba. And so my left hand controlled the jaw, and I was the voice on set. So I did Jabba's voice in my British accent, which made people chortle. And then Toby did the head movement and the tongue. So we were coordinating all of that. And then between us, we would make his body move, because we were locked in around our shoulders into his torso. So if we both moved forward, Jabba would move forward. If we both moved backwards, you'd move backwards. If I moved forwards and Toby moved backwards, the turntable would rotate. So we could actually rotate his shoulders by how we were performing our body. So with Yoda, primarily a hand puppet, just controlling the bulk of it, with other puppeteers assisting on the facial expressions. But Jabba was very much a team effort. And then we had Mike Edmonds in the tail, and then we had radio control for the eyes and for the expressions. So, yeah, a lot of puppeteers to bring Jabba to life. But Toby and I had just come off of the Dark Crystal, which was Jim Henson and Frank Oz's amazing, groundbreaking animatronic movie, and we'd been on that. I'd been on that for about 3 years. We had found a shorthand of how to take a character and bring it to life on screen, because we had very little time to try and get Jabba up and running, as it were, in as far as a performance, because it just took so long to build. We were pretty much having to do some of our earliest performances with very little rehearsal. When I look at the film, because it was filmed out of sequence, but when I look at the film, I can see where some of our early shots that are okay, and then where we sort of got into our stride as a team. So it was very much finding the best way of communicating Jabba's personality through the team, and so same with Yoda, same sort of approach of the acting side, but the physicality was very different.
And with like being the actor and also a puppeteer, creature creator, to what degree do you find with more like Jabba than with Yoda, but with other things that you've created too, where's the line of like, okay, I need to bring Jabba to life, but hey, could we maybe like tweak this thing? Can we change this aspect about it? Like, how much do you get to put your voice in there versus just like, I got in the suit and I made it move?
Yes, interesting. Well, I was very lucky right from the early days, because with Yoda, there was just a handful of people building Yoda. I was then drafted in to do the eyes because one of the puppeteers was ill, so I got to actually become a puppeteer on Yoda after having been involved in building him. So that even from the very first job that I was able to do that, and on the Dark Crystal I did the same thing. I was primarily a puppet builder for the longest time until we started filming. So with Jabba, I wasn't. I was actually Stuart Freeborn did actually offer me the role of supervising the build on Jabba, but I was contracted to Jim Henson, so I couldn't do it. So John Coppinger and Bob Keane did that, and they did an amazing job of building him. But every once in a while, there would be something that I would notice. I think the very first time we got into Jabba, the idea was to winch his head down on a chain and fix it down onto his body and do all the seal around his neck. And then when we were to come out at lunchtime, they'd winch the head off and we'd climb out through the neck. And I thought, that doesn't, that's going to, and it took forever the first time we did it. And I said, well, we're already on a raised set because of the Rancor pit. Why don't we just cut a hole underneath Jabba where he's standing, and we can climb up inside and get in and out whenever we want to, and nobody, and the head can stay put. And they, all right then. So, so yeah, so some of my troubleshooting and problem solving that I love to do was taken on board. So that was nice. But from pretty much onwards, I was building the puppets I was performing. So I could have an argument with myself if you were. Say, no, that's not right. That's not right. So, and that's the bit that I like, is that constant problem solving and trying to improve everything, even if it's an existing design. Well, how can we make this lighter? How can we make the arms interchange more quickly? How can we get the balance of this right? How can we increase the facial expressions? So always finding ways of improving the puppet build to allow a better performance.
Obviously Star Wars is a continually growing franchise. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. So with so much more to come, would you ever consider returning to Star Wars to make more if they offered anything to you?
I would, yes, but I think, to be honest, it's I'm 65. I basically had a 45 years, amazing years in the film industry. Film industry has changed quite a bit, and it's not nothing like the same place that I when I started in 1979. So I think it's time for my younger colleagues. Who a lot of them are in the UK, and they have been working on the different new Star Wars films. A good friend of mine, Dave Chapman, BB-8, for instance, and so I think it's time for them to have the baton and keep going and try and create the new Star Wars characters for the world.
Take the puppet strings as you will.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, definitely. I mean, if an opportunity arose, I'd be very happy to do that. Yes, it was an amazing period of time.
Yeah, no, and you're talking about how Hollywood is changing, and obviously we've seen a lot of that as we move away from a lot of puppetry in real life
Hmm.
animatronics, and they're going to CGI. So
Hmm.
we've seen like a nice meld of it sometimes, and then sometimes we see the CGI and we're like, oh, that was really bad CGI. So I'm
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
curious, as far as what are your thoughts on the future of puppeteering versus animatronics, or like how those two could possibly correlate to each other or coexist?
Yes, I mean it's interesting. The the most recent film that I worked on was Coyote versus Acme, which sadly has been shelved by Warner Brothers. What was amazing about this film is, unlike Roger Rabbit, which I was chief puppeteer on Roger Rabbit, I was Coyote, Wile E. Coyote every day on set with my actual scale lightweight foam reference puppet. So we knew he would be removed, replaced, and added, and they would add the animation in afterwards. But because again he doesn't speak, so how do you have a non-verbal cartoon character on set and a live action set interacting with the actors if you don't have a puppet? So producer Christofaria said, "Yeah, no, that's the way we're going to do it." So he brought me in, and every day I was Coyote on set. But these days, the technology will allow the filmmakers to completely get rid of me and the puppet from the background. So now I can be in every shot so that Coyote can be acting, truly acting with the other cast members. Will Forte was phenomenal. It was such a joy working with him. He was just brilliant and he was so funny. And we just really enjoyed this double act between Coyote and Will. And so, yeah, I got to actually act and puppeteer Coyote for every shot in the movie, where in the past the techniques wouldn't allow you to do that. So you do that in the first rehearsal, maybe one take, and then they would take the puppets out because it'd be too expensive to get rid of the puppeteer and the puppet. But now the new technology allows the puppeteer to be there. And of course, Coyote is an animated character, so it's completely right. It's not like, oh yes, he should be an animatronic. No, no, it's I was there to make sure that Coyote's personality was alive on set, and it was a true joy. It was a true joy. So I can see the technology in that area really helping. Like where the wild things are, there's big walk around costumes, and then they do animated faces on top. So there's lots of different hybrids of techniques of mixing the different media to get the character. As long as you've got somebody who's creative and is true to the character, then hopefully any of the new techniques will only just help to bring that character to life.
It almost seems like it's opening possibilities for like a more symbiotic relationship between the two.
Maybe, yes, maybe. Because obviously with certain animatronics there's things that they cannot do. I mean just physically cannot do, and the computer animations can do anything. In some ways that's some of their flaws, if anything, is that they go too far, they go the other side of believable. Um, but some really great, amazing animators do phenomenal work on bringing all the new CG characters to life. It's just another tool set, I think.
So, seeing the smile and the joy, do you have like a favorite pet project or a character, something that you've created is like your standout? Yoda probably being one of the most well known, but is there any creature that you have that like this is the one that was like the most memorable, or the one that I had put the most in?
Well, yeah, every single character has its own unique sort of. I end up getting to love them all. I mean, I was working on Flintstones 2, and I was working with Misha Sisti, Kevin Carlson on Puppy Dino, and we were rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing, and we were no, it's not quite right, and we are just like really trying to get this just right. And Stephen Baldwin, the actor, came back and said, "Guys, you're taking it way too seriously." So we all felt about laughing. But then I said, "But Stephen, if we don't believe in the character, nobody will." But I think one of the characters we all enjoyed investing in was Mr. Tinkles from Cats and Dogs 1 and 2. And he was just so much fun to perform. He was one of those jobs where the original brief was, well, we've got this mad cat, and no one really had built a particularly good animatronic cat up to that point, and they all always looked a little weird. So they said, well, yeah, maybe we'll get half a dozen shots out of the puppet if we're lucky. And so we I supervised the design of the puppet, and we really worked hard to get the mechanics, the engineering, the fur, and everything just right through the Jim Henson Creature Shop in Burbank, and then took a whole team of puppeteers to Vancouver, and we rehearsed and rehearsed. And from those maybe 6 shots, we puppeted every shot in the movie. And so it was a nice success for us. Some of the shots didn't make it, of course, they were just reference for uh, sort of editing purposes, but there's way more of the puppet in the film. And I think actually it's probably the most amount of images of Mr. Tinkles are the puppet, which was not going to be the case. So it was nice because up to that point, the director was just filming animals, and the animals would do here, and they'd look there, and they'd look there, and they'd look there, they'd look down. And of course, then they would add all the facial animation and the talking later. So when you were actually doing it, it appeared like nothing really was happening, you know. So it was very, very tough. The animal trainer Boone Narr, phenomenal, and Mark Hardin, who was able to train cats to do specific things, unbelievable. Just it was an absolute amazing experience. But then we were able to fill in like the performances and the characters with the animatronics, and that was a real joy. And following it up with Mr. Tinkles dressed as Hannibal Lecter for the second one was just like, yeah, yeah, just so much fun, so much fun.
Not that puppeteering's easy on any production, but what were some of the harder projects that you worked on, and what were the challenges that you faced while you were doing those?
Well, Jabba was one initially because of his weight and his size, but then we also worked on Little Shop of Horrors. I say we because there was a core team of 16 puppeteers, and we all worked together on bringing the Audrey 2 puppets to life. But they were very large, heavy mechanisms, and the biggest plant was the size of a small VW car. And so it's absolutely enormous, and we're all manually driving these expressions with heavy levers. All of us were getting back problems. I've had permanent back issues ever since doing that film, as a lot of my colleagues have. So physically, that was really demanding because we're trying to make the plant speak in real time. And in fact, working as hard as we could, we couldn't quite get there fast enough. So we actually filmed that movie. Every time we shot the plant, we shot in slow motion, and then they sped it up. So we shot at 16 frames a second for the Feed Me plant, and then Mean Green Mother was 12 frames a second when it's normally 24 frames for projection. It was very physically demanding, but I think it still holds up as some of the very best animatronic work that's ever been done.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, for sure.
And so throughout your plethora of various works, how many of the puppets have you or animatronics have you personally constructed that have made it to film or television?
Interesting. Yes. Well, I mean, Pseudonymous and Goblins on Labyrinth. I built and puppeteered Some Fun Now puppet for Little Shop of Horrors. I designed, built, and created all the rigs, the puppeteering rigs, and the performance rigs for uh, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Baron Munchausen, I was chief puppeteer and worked on The Baron and Venus. So pretty much most of the films from that point onwards, I was involved in the construction and the designs of the puppets that made it to the film. All the cats and dogs puppets, I was supervisor, so I made sure that they were the way I wanted. Same with Snow Dogs, Stuart Little too. So when it comes to something like the Muppet Christmas Carol, all the Muppets are created by the Muppet puppet builders, you know. So I didn't build any of those, but myself and Mike Quinn, we refurbished Sprocket the dog and Uncle Travelling Matt while we were doing the international co-productions in Europe. So we even got to do a little bit of work on those puppets. So typically, most of the characters that I've worked in, including the one you'll never see, which is Wile E. Coyote, I built that with my son
No,
Duncan.
we're still holding out hope because everything I've heard about that movie, I want to see that movie so bad.
Yeah,
Same.
no, it's amazing film. It really is. Sometimes people will shelve a movie because it's not very good. This is the exact opposite.
With all of like the various puppets, like you said, with the Muppets, like the Muppets are the Muppets. You come in, you work with what you have.
Yeah.
Is there been instances where somebody's come to you with like, I kind of have this vague idea, bring something to life for me, where you get like a little bit more free creativity with it?
Yes, I mean, there's been a couple of times where someone's come up to me with maybe a music video and saying, "Well, we don't really have any money and we've got very little budget, and what can you do for that?" And so it's like problem solving for coming up with characters and not breaking the bank, and that can be fun too. I mean, in the UK, I set up a company with fellow puppeteer Mike Quinn in 1988, and we basically designed and created all our own puppets and then performed them. So and that was primarily for British television. We had teams of designers and puppet makers, and but we did probably the vast majority of the hands-on work ourselves. So we made sure that we were pushing the envelope in the puppet building so that we could enjoy it in the puppeteering. It's been an ongoing process of using the build to try and improve the puppets, to improve our own performances.
So, do you have any of the things that you've created, any of the puppets you've worked on, the animatronics, or is that once you create it, it belongs to the studio? So,
Certainly all the big films, yeah, that belongs to the studio. And I think even the original Yoda and the original Jabba no longer exist because they were made out of foam latex, and that
Oh,
crumbles to dust after a little while. So there's a few sort of old pieces of mechanisms that used to be on the inside, but yeah, so those don't really exist. Some of my own puppets I still have, obviously, that I've made, but yeah. Most of the movie puppets end up the property of the film companies. So I remember having to go and, after the first Cats and Dogs, deliver all the puppets to Warner Brothers archives to store them. So in case they needed them again, which we did actually. I went back to archives to pick up the original Mr. Tinkles when we rebuilt the new one. So studios own all of that. I have typically for many years set a contract where I own the mechanical rights and the method of construction, because that's 45 years of really working out how to build all this stuff. And if the film companies owned that, I could never build another puppet for anyone else.
right.
right.
So I keep all of that. So all the little tiny increments of improvement, then at least I can add that to the next build.
Have you ever been approached for a project with something that either like you didn't feel comfortable making, or something that for a movie that you're just like, nah, I'm gonna have to pass on that?
Most of the time, no. Most of the time, every project that comes through, typically, well, I've never had an agent, either as a puppeteer or as a puppet maker. And so it's nearly always people who know me who get in touch with me, say, "Oh, David, we've got this project. Would you like to do it?" And it's nearly always yes, because it's wonderful. Every once in a while, I certainly back in the UK, Mike and I would get some people that basically we felt they were time wasters trying to get us to do some work on for free and for a show that was clearly never going to happen. There's only been a couple of instances where the technology is not something I feel I'm comfortable with. Sometimes some of the like hydraulics and certain engineering that people do, I think no, that's if it's not dealt with really well, it could be quite dangerous. So that would really be the only time that I'd not want to be involved on more of a technical reason of the project being dangerous and possibly harmful to people around them. So
Well, and with saying yes to so many things, I mean, you've done, obviously Sprocket on Fraggle Rock, which was a kids show, and then
mhm,
you've done Labyrinth and Star Wars, which are geared much towards young adults or older kids.
mhm.
So, what is the difference, or what is kind of required differences between those two projects when you're working on something that's meant more for children versus a more adult audience?
Interesting. Well, yes. I mean, I think the main thing it comes down is the script writer. The script writer will give you the clues as to what the character is. Typically, I still like to embody the character, no matter who it's for. If it's for the absolute youngest child, I like that to be a fully rounded character that the kids can really connect to. And I guess maybe that's because my mum and dad were actors initially before they became puppeteers. They met at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, RADA, in London, and they were brilliant actors. And it was because their vocal range and their acting was so strong that their performances were always slightly different every show because it was always live, and they were able to really control and encourage the audiences. And so that's something that I really appreciated even as a child. So a sense of trying to get a fully rounded character was something that's important to me. But yeah, I've worked on Friends shows for kids, and I worked on Team America. So but the actual skill
Different
of
audiences.
a very different
Definitely
audience.
different audience.
Yeah, and again, it comes down just to the words rather than the performance. It's not the manipulation, it's not the skill of bringing the puppet to life. It's the particular words that the puppet is saying.
Is there any like role or franchise that you're still like kind of waiting to sink your teeth into, or is there some like pet project build that still lives in your mind that's like, okay, before I hang all the tools up, this will be the thing that I make?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think so. I mean, I love all my friends on Star Trek, and Derek and Core Waters represents a lot of those guys, and they're wonderful people. And I love Star Trek. It's really wonderful. For some reason, I've never been able to cross over from Star Wars to Star Trek. Um, so that's one of my things. I mean, and as far as building animatronics, I when I got the chance to revisit Mr. Tinkles, um, I decided to try and push him to a level that I'd never even attempted before. And he has 76 miniature cables going just to his facial, and they all go to servos that go to a computerized control called Concept Overdrive. And then myself and Bruce Lanoyle and Misha Sisti and Jeff Redknapp and Adam Bear, we all worked together. We were using digital data gloves to bring his face to life. So the technology that went into bringing that cat to life, and they ended up doing a close up of Mr. Tinkle's face, which was just his eyes, which is about 2 inches apart on the real puppet. And that filled the cinema screen and looked amazing. And I had designed eyelid um, shape changing mechanisms so his eyelids could change shape the way they do in animation. So um, I think I kind of sort of worked very hard to make him my small, tiny, miniaturized animatronic with the most amount of functions and controls that you could put into a puppet. Um, so, I mean, admittedly, I think I only had 3 weeks to build Mr. Tinkle's mechanism, and I built every single part of it. So he was one of my passion project for myself. I don't know how much further I could go on something like that. So I think I've kind of pushed the limits there.
For those who might not be familiar with some of your lesser known projects, I mean, again, obviously Star Wars, Labyrinth, the bigger stuff, what would you possibly recommend for them to check out if they wanted to see some of your lesser known projects?
Um, Something that people said, well, there's no animatronics in this, is there? Snow Dogs. It's a lovely film, Cuba Gooding Jr., directed by the lovely Brian Levant. They have quite a number of puppet shots of the lead dog in the film called Demon, and he's supposed to be quite an aggressive dog, and he looks kind of aggressive, but it was the sweetest, most gentle animal you could ever imagine, and wouldn't do any of those things at all. So we built an animatronic puppet to double for this dog, and it was supposed to be an actual match to the real dog. It was actually integrating the real dog into the shots with the actors, and that was people didn't even know it was in there. In fact, the producer um, was came up at the end of the crew screening to the director Brian Levant, and Brian said, "Hey, what do you think of the animatronics in the film?" And the producer said, "What animatronics?" You know, so sometimes if you do a job really well, they don't even know you're there. And another Brian Levant film, Are We There Yet? We did a digital bobblehead of which was basically real-time puppeteered CG through the Jim Henson Company. Also for Brian Levant did uh, Flintstones, Viva Rock Vegas, and
Yep.
that's just a fun film. It was
It
so much
really
fun to work
is.
on. Yeah, and then I don't know if people, well, they probably wouldn't be able to easily track them down, but I did a series of Nike commercials with puppets of Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, and we did those for Legacy Effects, ooh, probably 2010, and we did a whole load of them. We did about 25 commercials we filmed, and so I was in charge of building the heads. Bringing the heads up to speed. We had, I think, 4 days to build all the puppets, and
Oh
then
my
go and
word.
film. Yeah, so it was great fun. It was really good fun, but it was strange again because I was this English person performing Kobe Bryant, you know. And the director would tell me certain things about basketball. I had no clue. I've never played it, so I had no idea what they were talking about. So they had to kind of like walk me through what Kobe would be doing. So. Um, so but it was great fun and really enjoyed it. So
Oh, that's got to be amazing, though. So, like you were saying, obviously, again, you're behind these puppets. You're kind of the man behind the mask, so to speak.
mhm.
So how do we all still get to experience like Dave? In what ways are you able to kind of shine parts of yourself through, or is that kind of part of the point? Is that you want to be anonymous and that you should never be like Dave should never be there. It should always be, Jabba or Kobe.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I when I was at school, I did school acting productions again because I'd been a puppeteer with my mum and dad. I could remember great loads of script. Finding it harder these days, to be honest. But when I was younger, yeah, I learned great loads of script. So I do all the school plays and everything, and I enjoyed being an actor. But for me, I enjoy the fact that it's not a human being and that you're bringing life to this inanimate object, and each one has its strong personality, and it's I really try to push my sounds a bit weird, but push my soul through the puppet into the camera. I really try to project all of the humanity that I've got into the characters, even if they're nasty baddies like Jabba. They still want to have some kind of essence of humanity coming out through those characters, and um, and that's the bit I love. I love the fact that I can be all these different people. You could never, as an actor, play all of those different roles.
So do you like through all the stuff you've been involved in, do you have like your favorite on-set moment, like on screen, off screen, or like, with cameras rolling, with it not rolling?
Well, one of the most recent ones, which is why it's so clear in my head, is again on Coyote versus Acme. We're doing a little sequence where Will Forte is in an elevator with Coyote, and Coyote starts pushing the button to try and get the elevator to move quickly. Will Forte said, "No, no, that won't speed it up." And of course, that's a red rag to the bull. So then Coyote starts pressing the button, pressing the button, pressing the button, and we were filming this with the puppet and with Will and with obviously all the crew around, and I thought it would last probably about 10 seconds, but I can see everybody like stifling their laughs, and the director just kept going. So did Coyote. Coyote just kept building and building and building, and different rhythms and different this, and then finally hit it once, and then like crossed his arms, and then the director said cut, and the entire crew exploded with laughter, and it was lovely. It was like, oh yeah, it's great. I don't think it's even in the film, but it was a moment for me where my performance connected to everybody so strongly. And Coyote was absolutely there on set in camera. So which is again what I love to do.
To kind of switch gears a little bit,
Mm.
if like you got essentially like the dream job with the animatronics, with the puppeteering, you've been interested in the special effects, if anything Hollywood based was not possible, have you ever thought about what a career might have looked like for you?
Interesting. Yes, just because before I had this lucky break of getting to work as a 19-year-old on Empire Strikes Back, music had interested me, like I think it does with every teenager, every teenager. And I had actually saved up and bought myself a drum kit, and I was part of a band. I really enjoyed that, and I was thinking, yeah, no, I love music, and it would be something that I'd love to do. So I would be listening in the workshop, all anywhere on the planet, listening to the radio. Often in the UK, a song would come up. First time I hear it, that's number one. And people look at me, what? I said, yeah, it's number one. And sometimes I say, but I think it's appalling. But that's going to be number one. Or sometimes that's fantastic, it's going to be number one. I was always consistently correct. So I was thinking, well, I've got an ear, certainly back then in the 90s, for what would have been a successful song. So if I had gone into music, I think that would have been something that I would have really enjoyed. But of course, my skill set was far greater in puppetry, so it made no sense to drop working on Star Wars to go into an amateur drum band.
Probably a good career choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But something creative, it would have definitely been something creative. I always love sculpting, so engineering as well. So I could have, if it wasn't film special effects, I quite like just regular construction work and fixing things up at home. And
So, I mean, obviously, Star Wars might fit into this category, but what would you consider your biggest nerd flex?
yes, biggest nerd flicks. Well, then, yeah, I mean, I think Star Wars has to be the first one. Um, there's a growing nerd for fan base for like Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. They are doing a whole series of conventions. They've been doing them in London. Um, actually, the very first Dark Crystal convention was at the studios, the Elstree studios that we filmed the movies in. So that was lovely to go back to that. That would be, I think that's got to be the main. I mean, I worked on. I can't imagine that would be much of a nerd film. The Lost in Space, the '97
Okay,
Lost
I
in
loved that
Space.
Yeah.
movie. I'm gonna be
Right.
honest, I loved that movie.
Yeah,
So,
so I worked on that. So there's a little bit of nerd going on in there, I think, because the Lost in Space again is the original one way back in the '60s was magical. So, but yeah, I think probably of all of them, it's got to be Star Wars.
A little bit of more like I like to call this nerd speed dating, but Dave's going down to the pub to have a pint. Out of all the characters you've had hands on or hands in, who's your wingman?
That's an interesting one because they're all so unique. I mean Yoda. I mean working on Yoda. I mean that was my very first movie job, and it's always got to be one of the highlights of my entire career because it was so unexpected and such an amazing journey. But I also love performing Sprocket because I did the full seasons about three times over. So I did probably more. Well, I certainly did more Sprocket episodes than Steve Whitmire, who did the original Canadian version. So
well, I mean, honestly, I think bringing a dog as your wingman is a great idea because who doesn't love dogs?
I was gonna say that, or Mr. Tinkles, curled up nice in your arms at the bar.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He wouldn't be there. No, Mr. Tinkles would be trying to rule the world and ordering drinks for people that they didn't like. So, um,
Running up your bar tab.
Yeah, the chaos of Mr. Tinkles might overshadow the wingman responsibilities.
I think so.
Fair.
Yeah, yeah. So I think yeah, maybe Sprocket. So
All right. Well, to completely shift gears here, the real reason we're here, let's talk about your book. So, why don't you go ahead and give me the title, and then give me a little bit of like how you came up with that title. Oh, look, you've got it right there.
there it is. That's the first one. So that's me with my string puppets when I was 7. It's called My Life with Animatronics, Movies, Puppets and Beyond. Guess probably 10, 15 years ago, if not longer, a friend of mine said, Dave, you've got to write an autobiography. And I said, I'm too busy. It's like, no, you got to. It's like all your stories and the various things you've done. And it said, and also be good so that your grandchildren can read about you when they're older. So I said, well, no, it's a good idea to put it down because all the stories I have, and when I'm gone, the stories are gone. So it's like, right, okay, I'll do that. So the last couple of years, I've been working on that just to try and get a sense of some of the stories that I enjoyed the most on the films that I worked on and TV series, and I was very lucky. Got approval from Lucasfilm and from Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill, and Frank Oz for the
Mhm.
photographs in the book, and Brendan Fraser and the Jim Henson family as well. So it's been great. I've been and Disney, they're amazing. So able to get approval for some never before seen photographs, and say hopefully people will enjoy it.
So what was the process of actually writing, getting everything down for you? Was there any point you had to kind of like switch gears? Does writing come naturally with the creative process? Was it a little different?
Well, 10 years ago, I decided I was going to write a movie. So I'd spent a while improving my writing ability. And I did. I completed the script and worked on the movie. So that process of uh, writing, rewriting, which is what most writing's about. Um, and also, I wanted like a vocal style. I didn't want it sort of like an academic book if I could help it. I wanted it to sound like me talking. So sometimes I would just use voice activated text. And that worked out quite well. But then I always had to go through and do full editing. So it was really just trying to find one or two stories from each project. And then often it was based on a photograph. If I had a particular photograph that I liked, well, I'll do a story around that photograph. So the way the book works is that there are just it's just full of photographs all the way through of all the different processes and procedures and everything. So there's like just loads and loads of photographs, and the text relates to all those photographs. So it was rather than the typical book, which is lots and lots of words with one section of images in the middle. Now this is photographs all the way through. So which is the way I wanted to present it.
As you were going through this process, was there any aspects of it that surprised you as you were working from getting the words like from your head into a finished page?
I ended up really enjoying the process. The second part was getting two or three of my good friends to copy read it and give me notes, and I could go back with a different perspective on it. And then I left it sitting around for a while before I went back and reevaluated whether I liked it or not. I really enjoyed the process. I thought it was great.
So, are there any juicy carrots or teasers that you can provide us so fans will kind of know what's waiting for them in the book?
Well, there are behind the scenes pictures of Yoda that no one's ever seen before, and there are behind the scenes photos from Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and Fraggle Rock that no one's ever seen before. These are the little juicy photograph choices that I've been able to get approved, which is great. So it was so delightful that Frank did approve the photographs, because he typically doesn't like, as he and Jim didn't, even back in the day with the Muppets, he didn't like to give away the magic. But he was very generous in saying, yes, I'll give you my approval because it's me. So
That says a lot.
Yeah, and so just as to let our listeners know, the book will be available on the Barnes and Noble's website on February 25th, I believe. So it's coming up. It's very, very close. And if you're like me and you love to collect, Cool Waters is going to have you covered with a very special signed copy of the book that also comes with a signed 8x10 print of Dave's independent film, Maldix, I believe it.
Maldrix, yes.
Maldrix, yes.
Yeah.
And so that will also be signed. So if you're looking for those beautiful collector's items, I would definitely recommend checking that out. We'll have links, obviously, in the video descriptions to both of those options. And then if you want to go ahead and get a copy and have it signed personally by Dave because you just want to meet this wonderful individual yourself, we will also have a link to all of Dave's upcoming convention appearances.
Hmm.
And you can go ahead and check to see where he will be close to you.
Excellent. Yes, I'm looking forward to getting out to a few conventions with Derek from Cool Waters this year. So that's going to be great.
I always like to wrap up with a nice little bow. I call it a little softball. So if you could leave our listeners with any piece of life advice, what would it be?
Well, for me, just it's follow your passion. I mean, that's what I've done, and that's what I've seen with all my friends around me. When if you find that you're passionate about something, then follow that passion, because it's the most rewarding experience when that passion comes to fruition. So I love puppetry. I really truly love puppetry, and I've spent the last 45 years in movies, 46 years now, um, making movies and creating characters, and I couldn't think of anything better. So yeah, if you find that you have a passion, I'd say follow it as much as you can. And if it's not something you can do as a career, then find a way of following your passion outside your money earner.
Right. Well, again, we want to thank Cool Waters Productions for just organizing this interview and allowing Dave to come on. Dave, thank you so much for spending this time with us. And again, we always appreciate being able to talk to you. You're such a wonderful and inspiring individual. So thank you.
True delight.
Well, thank you very much, and back at you both. So always a joy.